me know if I need to use the microphone. I doubt that that will be required. And imagine a world where all projects succeed. How would that be?
Wonderful.
Yeah. Wonderful or better?
Successful.
Even. Now we're going to talk about 3 points on the way to that, because this comes from IPMA's vision about a world where all projects succeed. So the theme of this Congress is the way to PM in a multicultural context. So clearly, we're all experiencing a different culture than most of us have seen, either because we're not native, or we're natives and we've got a bunch of aliens among us. We'll touch on the new ICB4. And when I asked the team, ICB4 what? They didn't quite get the pun. How many of you are familiar with ICB4? How many of you are experts in ICB4? Well, we all need to be expert because it has great new things for all of us and our customers and our audiences, our stakeholders. Because it reflects proven competences, and it's even better than version 3. We'll talk about paths through the maze of complexity of cultures and lack of competence. So that deals with 3 key challenges that we all face today. How many of you are competent? In what? Yeah, because we're not competent overall. We need to be competent among the things that count. We'll talk about complexity. How many of you face complex initiatives, projects, or programs? And we'll talk about cultures. Well, we know all about culture, unless, of course, we don't. If we look at the maze, it's been amazing what we've learned since ICB3 was introduced in Shanghai in 2006. One of the things that we learned is that it works so well that other organizations have copied us and moved beyond just understanding project technical things, but understanding the importance of people and understanding the importance of strategic alignment. So we've had a lot of learning since then. We have the opportunity over the next year or 3 years to embrace an even better baseline for improved performance. We've got the opportunity to extend beyond it in areas where we need to. The 3 dimensions that we're looking at is perspective. That's kind of like the context. Wherever we are in the organization, we have a different perspective, but we all need to share the same perspective if we're going to achieve our goal, attain our vision. Practice. These are the technical things. These are essential for an organization. And we can't be satisfied with so-so results. We need to continue to improve on those things. But it's a lot more than time and cost and quality or whatever we're trying to put into an artificial triple constraint. And people. Yeah, that's where it is. That's the first 10% of the job to get 90% of our results. And as I said, other organizations have only now started understanding this need to relate to these things. And then managing the complexity. We don't just do a complexity assessment for assessment purposes. We do assessment for risk management purposes. And I'll come back to that. Cultural appreciation. That's essential. And again, we're experiencing the need to appreciate other cultures instead of feeling a little bit out of sorts because things are different than where we come from. But the bottom line that we're seeking is to move to performance. We'll talk a little bit about that. How many of you are familiar with the periodic table of project management competence elements that I put together some years ago for ICB3? Well, you are now the first on Earth. They've seen it up in the International Space Station, to see the version for ICB-4. Of course, we start with our context, with the organization, with the strategic alignment, and getting the organization to work for us instead of us just working for the organization. Where before there were 12 or so, now there are 5. And then, of course, we have the bedrock foundation of typical project practice slimmed down a bit for some really intelligent reasons. And then, on the people side, guess what? Something that many of us pushed for in the last release, that communication isn't a technical topic. It's the heart and soul of success. So that's over there in people. Bravo. Bravo, IPMA and ICB team. So we now have a new periodic table that reflects the new elements, and it should be easier to prepare because there are fewer of them than there were in the prior version. And this is available to anybody who wants it, and I suspect you'll get an email that shows where you can download all the presentations and their contents. But having competence by itself isn't enough. We have to practice those competences, or else they get stale. And in fact, if I look at the importance of practice, even world championship football teams practice between games. Well, if they're already the champions, why do they need to practice? Who can tell me?
When muscle is not used, you atrophies.
So if they don't continue to use the muscle, then it atrophies. Gee, it's a good thing that doesn't happen with our brains, isn't it? Or does it? Yeah, and in fact, they also practice to maintain the rhythm and the teamwork, because it's not just a solo sport. It's the tight connection of not thinking but acting out of teamwork that helps the best teams to accelerate their wins. So world-class athletes do this. Do we have world-class project and program and portfolio managers? Yeah, they do this too. You do this too when you keep that practice, because you know the old thing, practice makes perfect. But we have to move beyond knowledge. Other organizations stay with knowledge. Now they say, well, knowledge is a competence. Well, it's a foundation, it's a strong foundation. But knowledge is potential energy. Potential energy doesn't do anything. It has to be kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is knowledge applied, and we call that skill. And still, that's not enough. We have to have the reinforcing attitudes and the use of those skills. We have to move beyond knowledge to doing something with that knowledge. And as you can see from the chart, there's a very high level, or relatively high level, of benefit from the do side. Looking at the organization, do is moderate, but we're still not at high business value. What do we need to do to move beyond do? It's kind of like, what is it, doobie-doobie-doo?
It's do-do.
We need to perform. That's what executive management wants. That's what your stakeholders want. So knowledge is a brilliant foundation, but it doesn't end there. If it ends there, there's no value add. It's waste. And even do. I see a lot of low-level doers in the world of project management. And everyone can be saved, and ICB-4 can help towards that. With the right instructors, with the right coaching, with the right executive fulfillment. So the second level of our maze, complexity. If I have a more complex project or program, there are two things that I can do that are smart, and they're very silly things. Among the smart things is to understand where the complexity lies. Among the smart things is to appoint a project or program manager who has the competence and the ability to perform effectively in a more complex project. Another smart thing to do is to step back and ask the question, Well, why is this complex? Because to me, complexity is a risk. And we all know that we manage risk by finding ways to prevent, to intervene, to recover, to transfer those risks. So if we use complexity intelligently, we could look at a series of options of doing both assigning the right people as opposed to the practice, the resource management practice of, well, who's available this week? I know nothing at all about the skills needed, about the competence needed, about the experience in sector needed. So, manage the risk. Try that. Appoint somebody who's actually certified at that level. Because some organizations just certify people in project management or program management. IPMA certifies people as project managers, as program managers, as portfolio managers. Is there a difference? That's all just jargon, isn't it? Well, maybe it is if we believe the ads. So, how many of you use some kind of complexity evaluation early in every project or program? How many of you use it during portfolio evaluation? Yeah, that's the smartest time. So, use it then, and then use it, I say use it at each major stage gate or milestone, because those things change just like risks change. Manage those complexity factors as risks, just like I've said, and then identify the right program or project manager for that complexity level. Now, ASAPM on our website, IPMA USA, has a simple complexity model. And instead of just going through, and you can't really read this from back there, and dotting the cases, low complexity to high complexity, consistently strong sponsorship support versus seldom strong sponsorship support, I see organizations that go through this and, well, it said here that we're supposed to do the complexity evaluation. There it is, and it says we're going to lose. Okay, well, why don't you use that to increase the sponsorship support, to increase the communication within the structures, the organizational structures, and manage those risks. See, it's all risk management. It's like much of project management. There's also complexity categories, each with their questions about stakeholder relationship. And by the way, all of this you can access openly on the web, and you can copy this down from the paper presentation. Resource complexity, project definition complexity, project delivery complexity. Sometimes when you establish the complexity early in the project, by the time you get through design and you choose your implementation solution, you've got a lot more complex project or program than you thought you had. And I see few organizations that wake up and say, oh yeah, we're supposed to do that again. Now, a smart manager does that, don't you, Kevin? So, based on your score of this project, you need an IPMA Level B Senior Project Manager. Oh, okay. Now, how do I get one? Hans, if I'm in Switzerland, how do I find an IPMA Level B Senior Project Manager?
I know people.
You what?
I know people.
Oh, so if you're in Switzerland, go ask Hans, and Hans can tell you in every other nation where you go, or the IPMA website may even be able to help you with that. Let's tell you where the member association is in each nation. So in managing complexity, this is really just a recap of just one of three subjects. Few people really evaluate management complexity. That tells me that they don't care whether the project's successful or not. They don't care whether we achieve the vision of all projects succeeding or not. All they care about is ticking the little checkbox that said, oh yeah, we evaluated that project. You know, they didn't ask, did we succeed? That's because we don't know how to measure success. Joel alluded to that. Even fewer map the complexity of the talent needed. And no wonder 68% of projects fail, depending on which false study you read. So we can improve on that. And ICB, again, is a big part of that. But the tools around ICB also help. Relating to cultural context. Now, you can kind of see subtly that this little, must be a junior project manager who's got a certificate in project management, who's trapped inside the maze. But you see how these things we're talking about have already blasted down the walls of the maze? That is the power of a focused approach to not just certification, but to organizational development that we need to spend more effort upon. So, in the 70s and 80s, we used social styles model, thinking styles model, all kinds of interesting tools to understand the individuals on a team and to help them build stronger teams. Well, that was pretty cool stuff, and a lot of organizations still use it, and it's still very, very useful. We see a lot of differences in different regions, in different economies. I know that some parts of the U.S., the jobless recovery since 2008, it's a completely different climate than I remember in the roaring 90s. So there are different impacts, and every different scenario, situation needs different attention to what's important to win. But a big part of it across the board is that we're moving to significantly more multicultural projects. So I recently discovered something that's called When Cultures Collide. It's a great book written by Richard Lewis. Is anybody familiar with that book? I've long been a junkie for all of the touchy-feely social styles and thinking styles tools, but this thing blew me away with its insights. Lewis breaks things down into 3 different groups: people who are more multi-active, people who are more reactive, and people who are linear active, and it's based just on linguistics, verbal patterns, and the way people communicate with each other. Nothing to do with psychology or anything else, and that's why I like it, because it reinforces a lot of the things that come from those other places. So, in red, multi-active, if we understand multi-active being warm, emotional, loquacious, and impulsive, well, it actually says, based on his research, the countries that are most like that, and the countries that are somewhat like that but a little influenced by the others. If we're looking at the yellow, reactive are courteous, amiable, accommodating, compromiser, and good listener. We have from India down through Vietnam, and over here Canada, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan. And then over here, blue, Germany, Switzerland, and Luxembourg. Linear, active, cool, factual, decisive planners. Looks to me like these 2 groups might get along pretty well. Those 2 groups might get along pretty well. But how do you think they work with people all the way across the chart? So Lewis spent a whole bunch of time in different countries, but the hypothesis is, if I'm UK and I'm going to Finland, how do I need to communicate if I'm going to communicate most effectively with people from Finland? And fortunately on the chart, Finland's fairly close, but he was so enthralled with the results of practicing what his theory was that he spent years and years going to different countries. And notice that every country isn't a stereotype. These are tendencies, because every country has its own diversity. But it's the newest thing I've seen that takes another look at how countries relate. And I found the book on eBay because it's a pretty expensive book. I'd recommend it to anybody who's serious about performing like a world-class project or program manager in other cultures. So part of the book talks about getting to grips with cultural diversity, managing and leading in different cultures, getting to know each other. Those are the chapters of the book. And this sounds to me like the perfect antidote for everybody who came to this World Congress expecting to improve their performance across cultures. And this isn't paid or anything, but I'm really appreciative of the work that he's done, and I'd recommend it to anybody, even if you just check it out of a library or whatever. So to summarize, our purpose as a profession or practice, and there's even some dispute about that, is to manage beneficial change and achieve business results. If we're not doing those things, then we are failing. We're not those world-class professional project and program managers. We're children on a play field who have a complicated rule book, and we're still trying to learn the rules, and we're not practicing to our potential. We need to harness the benefits of ICB4. We need to manage the complexity instead of just doing it as another tick box, and engage and respect the same cultural differences that caused some of us some challenges just the last several days. And the outcome is we move the world forward through the discipline, the profession, and the practice of program and project management. Simple task. You've all been doing that, but now carry it back to your peers. Any questions? I guess it's start out.
We are complete.
It's just the point you raised about linear, active, multi-active, reactive. I think is very, very important concept in dealing with different cultures. Because, the time constants are different. Reactive, very fast, but, the listening power is much less comparatively. So I think it really unfolds tremendous amount of social and cultural dimensions when you have multicultural projects going on. So I think that aspects of understanding and appreciating, I think, is the key. It's not that one is better than the other. Everything is good, but how do we synergize? That is the challenge.
Yes, and how do different cultures bring their strengths?
Correct. The strength of each.
And as opposed to a typical tendency, especially when we're under pressure in projects and programs, is to resist the change. The change agents resist change, don't we? And so instead, if we can kind of be a little bit Eastern religion and a little bit more Zen-like, and accept it and harness it. Yes. Thomas?
Stacy, I have a question to you. My experiences, I've worked a lot with US teams, and then I have all US citizens. They are from Mexico, from India, from US, Pakistan. So it's also your experiences, we talk about culture, even in one country, because you place the US in one point. My experiences is that's not the one point, because you have cross-functional aspects in the US a lot. Is it also your experiences?
Yeah, I think that there are multiple challenges with cross-cultural projects and programs that have many different cultures intertwined, because you end up falling back to old stereotypes about. I remember when I first started working in Latin America, I was told to be careful of the mañana mentality. What I found was that getting people excited would help you override that. And so I found that if I wasn't careful, I was bringing my own biases into the initiatives, and those were the problem, not the problems of the single cultures. If I've got 5 different cultures, it becomes much more complex, and that's where we need to step back and embrace the situation, and then dialogue, talk, get real heartfelt communication. And to tell you the truth, I used a lot of caipirinhas to help with that. Yes, Kevin.
With the changing patterns of migration in the world,
Yes.
people are moving, working in different countries than they were born, and it's becoming more and more prominent. As a Canadian, they're saying that the traditional view of what a Canadian is, of a white Anglo background, is gone. In fact, in the city of Toronto, the city provides services in 54 languages today. If that pattern continues, how does this model
How does it help us?
survive?
Yeah.
Because I think it would start to fall apart once you can't define a culture in a country anymore.
Yeah, the lingual model is best for one-on-one understanding. So that's the reason I highlighted that in this presentation, is because I've seen dozens of these other things that are psychology-based and sociology-based, and those are pretty good. This is best for one-on-one. I think that that part of the value of all these instruments is it causes you to be somewhat active in your choice of communication as opposed to automatic. Because the least effective project managers, program managers, and team members are those who are on automatic all the time. And anything that causes you to step back and deal wisely with introspection about, okay, where's this person coming from, will help overcome exactly the situation that you described. And Europe is now seeing it. In the U.S., with our southern border, we've had political problems because people are too vociferous about it, but we've managed to assimilate fairly well a strong group of immigrants who have different value systems than we do, but it's completely different from what I'm seeing in Europe. I think that models like this would only serve to help us step back and think before we respond, as opposed to it being a panacea.
I just want to extend on that, just a small one.
And then I'll say.
The cultures will definitely vary, irrespective of migration. As long as the society remains, the culture will vary. It cannot be homogeneity. Diversity will exist for a million years. What would happen, or what is happening now, is because of the migration, the individual cultures of the geography are changing. Cultural difference will be there. Rich culture of Canada or culture of any other country will have impact of this migration. So in a larger context, the difference, diversity will exist to synergize that, but the culture itself is under transition in each area.
It occurs to me that it would be interesting if we put this together as a portfolio management assignment for a group just like this, because if project and program management are society's discipline of change, sometimes that change is unexpected, and instead of reacting to it the way that everybody in the media does, we should use our own tools to understand the situation before we come up with solutions. Alistair?
I just want to, thank you very much indeed. I just wonder what your experience was of applying this sort of thinking, not to people in different countries, but within project teams who bring together people from different professions and different organisations. In my experience, people from different professions and industries have completely different ideas and cultures and value systems.
Great question. So essentially, it's not just nation and their cultures, but engineering, for example, is a lot different than marketing. It's a lot different yet than finance. So what do you do when you start putting them together, even if they're from the same company or from contractor, subcontractor, and all of that? That's why I started using all of the sociological tools that are really fun, because if you get a bunch of engineers together with a bunch of marketing people, the engineers are all face down and avoiding eye contact, or at least that's the way it was in the 80s. And the marketing people think they don't like them, and so they get their feelings hurt before the discussion even starts. So I use those kinds of tools to develop integrated product teams for 30 years. And the reason I was so excited about this is because it uses a completely different basis for coming up with some of the same diagnosis, and that helps me in retrospect for the places that my typical solutions didn't necessarily work. So anything that helps you to step back and understand the situation, understand what's going on, instead of our immediate tendency to solve the problem, is a gift. And so I think these are the most important tools that we can have after ICD-4, of course. Thomas,
That's
harder.
when it comes to migration, what Adesh was telling, I underestimated very often in global context is corporate culture. Because especially if you have leading global acting companies, you have not just merge of cultures, you have corporate cultures all over the world.
Yes.
And even if you would assume your migration is already done, you still have this kind of global or corporate culture what is impacting behavior of people.
Yes, and Meg's next, but an interesting insight about that too. Working in a major pharma organization as a consultant in project performance improvement in the 80s, I was then asked to take the same work from this huge pharma organization around to Europe, and moving it from a 10,000 person headquarters in the US to a number of satellite organizations, little manufacturing facilities or whatever with 100 people max or 15-person offices. The global corporate culture changes with the number of levels in the organization. And so we need to be able to count all the variables that are going to affect. Aside from that, you're exactly right. Thank you. Meg?
So I'm Meg Infurati, and I am a psychologist, so I thank you for dismissing me several times.
But you're not a psychiatrist, right?
I'm not a psychiatrist, no. But I do practice in the organizational, social, and cultural psychology fields. And so I was interested when we went through this because I think this is one of the few times when volunteer organizations are far and away ahead of corporate organizations. Because I work with the ICRC and the Red Cross, United States Red Cross, as well as FEMA, the United States Federal Emergency Management Organizations. And we're well ahead of ensuring that organizational psychologists or somebody with that specialty is already in the team, because we know that those that we serve are going to present all those challenges.
Yep.
Not only that, but those that volunteer bring those challenges. So I think if you're looking for some places to go see how does this work, it might behoove people to go look at the ICRC or FEMA, some of these larger international organizations, because they've been doing this for years, and get that the people component is the answer to the problem. It's not the technical delivery of project management. It's that people have to be able to work within the confines of the project management structure of whatever the project is.
Thank you, Meg. And with that, thank you very, very much, and we'll see you tonight.
What's that?